Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of the Pick and Pop podcast. Today, I would like to welcome one of the top professional coaches of British basketball coaching, the only British coach to become a head coach at NCAA D1 college level and a trailblazer for all aspiring British coaches. I'd like to welcome Coach Donna Finnie.
Thanks for having me, Tony. I'm excited to chat today and talk a little bit about how I got over here, and then also, just about our program a little bit too.
That's great. Coach, so first of all, let's talk about your introduction to the game of basketball. Obviously, you're from Scotland, and there's a rich history of basketball in Scotland. But how did you get involved in the game, and what was that path that you took?
I actually didn't play basketball till I was in my first year at high school. I had played the dreaded netball before that, and I kind of got frustrated with netball because I was stuck as a goal shooter, and I would get frustrated with our defense because I couldn't be down the other end, and I found myself yelling at them, and I didn't like it very much, but I knew that I wanted to play a team sport, and I had been doing track as well, and swimming a lot. And I got to high school, and luckily my PE teacher at high school had played for basketball for Scotland and also volleyball for Scotland. And he saw me the first week, and I was 5'11" in first year, so he was like yelling at me to come to basketball tryouts, and I'd never played.
Sure.
And it kind of went from there. So I was really, really lucky that he was in our PE department, because I think had he not asked me to go along to that, I don't know I would be sitting here today.
That's always the case, that one stroke
and I
of
think,
luck.
yeah, we forget about the PE teachers a lot in the basketball journey, because people talk a lot about their club coach and their national team coach, etc. But a lot of the time it's the PE teachers that initiate that introduction to basketball. And I was really lucky that I had Ronnie Hamilton and Kate Johnson, who were both very, very involved with basketball at my high school. And they kind of looked me into it at a very early age and were very encouraging throughout my whole, and I still stay in touch with both of them now, actually. So,
Awesome.
yeah, lucky to have them.
And from school, did you go into a club? What was the next stage from there?
Yeah, so there was a women's club based at our school that Kate Johnson actually played with, and her husband, Ken, who worked he was at Basketball Scotland at the time,
That's right.
he was the coach. And I remember I think I was 13 the first session I went to, and everybody else was in their like late 20s, late 30s. And I walk in like scared to death, as a 13-year-old. But they were really great with me. And at the time they were playing like in a local league. And quite quickly, I realized I wanted to take it a little bit more seriously, and I ended up transferring to play for a national league team. And it was really there that that was what made me realize I really wanted to pursue basketball, because I felt like the coaching that I got there and the teammates that I had were going to be able to, help me develop. And I really think that what I learned there with that particular coach is, both as a player and a coach, has helped me so much even to this day.
And who was that coach there? What was the club?
It was Team Caledonia that we were called at the time, and it was Dave Patterson that was the coach, and Dave had played for Scotland and was heavily involved. And I remember as a player, and I tell him this, I still talk to Dave all the time, and I tell him this, like, I thought he was crazy, and a lot of players think their coaches are crazy, but I really thought Dave was nuts, because he was in our face the whole time. And as a young girl, I felt like, God, he's getting on me so much, but I wouldn't take that back, because he was getting on me, but as he said, like, he saw that I could do it, and he was pushing me to be the best I could be. And I really appreciate him doing that, because I would never have had the courage to leave the UK and come over here and play and do the things that I've done if he hadn't instilled that in me at a really young age.
So from there, you did go to America for what? To high school or to college?
No, I went to college. I actually went to Lamar University, which is in our league, which is kind of funny going back there. And again, just like luck, really. I feel like a lot of my journey, I've been very lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Sorry. I was playing in the Four Countries in Doncaster, and we were playing I think we had a pretty good team that year. And I remember, I had a pretty decent tournament. And after the tournament, I got a phone call. I guess the coaches from Lamar had been at the tournament and was recruiting an English girl, and ended up offering me and a couple of other girls. And in fact, my roommate was on the Irish team that we played against.
Wow.
So we had 8 international girls on our team at Lamar that year. And it was a great experience for me, and I loved every second of it. But I could tell you stories that would take this whole hour up about that. So,
Well,
but it didn't work out for us at Lamar. And that's kind of where my story takes a little twist, because I came back after the end of my sophomore year because of some issues that we had with NCAA violations and some coaching issues, etc. And pretty much the whole team left. There was only a couple of them stayed. And so it didn't work out for me. And I always felt I loved being in Texas. Like I just had this affiliation with Texas. I loved it. I loved the people. And when I got home, I just always kind of felt like I'd end up back in Texas. And I don't know how it happened, but it did. So
yeah, no, it's and we got a big part of this journey. So from coming back from Lamar, what was the next, and where was this? Was there any time when you were playing college basketball that you thought that you really felt an affinity to coaching, or that there was something there that you wanted to push in the future, or was that when you came back into Scotland that you started to really feel for the coaching side?
Yeah, I think it really started there, honestly, because as a coach now, I don't want to talk badly about coaches, but you learn a lot from what not to do, from playing for other coaches, and also being around coaches. And we had a really, really good assistant coach at Lamar, Coach Sandy. She was awesome. And I really appreciated the time that she took with me as a foreign player, to make sure I was okay, and that I was settling in and things. And if I had any questions, I knew I could always go to her. And I just felt like her personality and the way that she interacted with the players was just so great. And I appreciated her so much during that time, especially at the end of that year when we were having problems, with NCAA, etc. And we needed her a lot, and she was there for us, and that was great. And I thought, like, that's something maybe I can see myself doing. And when I came back, I finished my degree at Heriot-Watt University, and
I'm going to
had
talk to you
many
about. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute when we talk about
okay.
philosophy. I was very interested to
Yeah.
know, what you majored in, and that was I want to know how that has a relevance to your coaching. But let's just continue with you finished your degree, and then.
Yeah. And like, it's funny because when I think back, I spent a lot of time when I was in college back home working with our basketball development officer in Edinburgh, and I was running camps for her, and I was doing coaching. Like, I started like becoming a tutor for Basketball Scotland to deliver, basic entry level courses, and I was very, very involved even as a student. Like, so as I was about to graduate, I knew that I wanted to work in basketball. That was like my goal. And I can't tell you how many times my mom said to me, basketball's not going to be your career. You're not going to make any money out of basketball. Like, go and do something. Because before I'd even got to that stage, like when I was coming out of high school, I had thought about doing law. And I was either looking at law or journalism. That was my two things that I'd kind of thought about. And it was really strange. At the last minute, I just had this pull to sports science. And it was just completely out of the blue. I hadn't thought about it really. And I was very, very lucky, I think, that I was in the first group of people in that sports science degree that Heriot-Watt put together. And I had a great classmates that were a lot of elite level performers in sport that were in our class. And I think that was something that really, really helped me. And again, I've pulled a lot of things from that experience for sure.
And so did you go straight from university into Basketball Scotland as a development officer, or how was that? How did that work?
Almost. So I worked for them for 6 months in the office, like doing administrative work, with the hope that if a basketball development position opened up, I'd done enough to then get it. And then that happened. I got the Edinburgh development position about 6 months, I think it was, after that. So it again, just things happen, and I've been very lucky
Sure.
that those doors have opened. But yeah, so I worked for them, and I learned a lot in the office, just how things work nationally, from an administrative level, and then got into the basketball development job, which I was in for, several years before obviously coming over here.
Yeah. And at that time, you're a development officer, you're coaching, you're tutoring. Who are you? Are you starting to really realize that coaching is where you want to go? And if so, who was mentoring you? Who are you going to on a regular basis to upscale knowledge and try to get better?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because when I first got involved, I was doing club coaching with City of Edinburgh for a couple of years, and I really, really enjoyed that. And I had an assistant coach, Stuart Gillis, who'd played, national team level and was very experienced. And his daughter was in the program, and we got him involved as an assistant. And it was just good, kind of, having him to lean on with his experiences. And he definitely helped me a lot. And then I got asked to get involved with the national teams, with the under 16 national team, because they needed a female. And Arthur McGuire was the head coach at that time, and he was based in Dundee, and very experienced coach. And I got involved with him. And I think with Arthur, the biggest thing that I learned was, the player development part of it, the fundamentals. Had a huge focus on that. And I really learned a lot from him in that respect, and how to kind of balance that with your practice schedules, like planning practice schedules and making sure you don't forget the player development side of things. So he was, key for me in my first few years. But the two that I've kind of gone to consistently have been Dave Patterson, my former coach, and then Ian Gordon. And Ian's been, to this day, I can call Ian at any point in time. And he watches a lot of our games. He watches our live stream games, and then he always sends me little comments afterwards, about what he thinks about the games. And Ian's obviously got experiences,
Huge.
yeah, and just, has been so supportive to me all through my journey in coaching. And I had the unfortunate pleasure of playing against him as a player, and remember him in the sideline, going red in the face, screaming at his players. But he's just so intense, and I learned a lot about, being able to push your players that hard, but have that relationship with them that you can do that. And that's something that he does really, really well. And I've leaned a lot on him. I remember calling him when we were in the European Championships in Luxembourg, and I had 3 kids end up in hospital the day before the final.
Wow.
And I was panicking, like, well, what the heck are we going to do? And I remember the conversation with him, and he said, well, you've got your core kids still, and you've got to just stick with what you were doing. And I had kind of saved a couple of things up my sleeve for that final, because I knew that's where we were probably going to be playing. And he's like, you got to use them now, and he just kind of, a lot of things that I was feeling, he verbalized and made me feel confident that I was doing the right thing. And he's been there for me a lot throughout my whole coaching career. So I'm lucky to still have him on my cell phone.
So, I mean, that's a good, like most of us, we've all got these kind of, big influences in our life, whether they start at a very early age or, wherever they come in the spectrum of our coaching careers. But, and those are really super important people. But at this time, I mean, there's not a professional game in Scotland, especially for the women's side. There's national team stuff is great, it's aspirational, but again, it's done on a budget basis. We all have to accept that.
Right.
And so where was this kind of drive for you, a focus that you either wanted to coach at a higher level or you wanted to get to America? Where was this coming from? Or has this been always something that you really wanted to do?
It wasn't something that I always wanted to do. It wasn't. It kind of grew as I got, further and further into my coaching career. And I remember having a kind of argument stroke discussion, I guess you could call, with Basketball Scotland, because we'd been going to the C division of the Euros, and you know, we'd won it a couple of years with the under 16 and the under 18 team. And like, as a player, I'm not going to improve if I'm playing teams I'm beating by 50, 60 points. Like, I'm not going to get any better. I'm not going to be able to push myself. And honestly, at that point, I was trying to give our girls, our players, the opportunities that I got to play overseas. And so through contacts that I still had, I was trying to link them up with colleges here, like to have opportunities to play. And I knew that coaches here are not going to want to watch us play against some of these Division C teams and win by 60 points.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because how are they going to see how they would do against better athletes over here? So I kind of remember begging us, can we please go to the B division? Like, I really want to take this team. And I had a really, really strong group of kids at that point, and kind of won the argument that this was the team to do it with and kind of go back to that B division level. As always, fundraising was the issue, right? Because we didn't have the budget, and it was like, well, you don't have the budget. And I said, we'll make it work. Like, we're going to do this. And we did. And I had great parents with that group that really bought into the thought process and the plan. And it was, you know, yeah, it was a rude awakening going to like playing. I remember we went one year and played against Belgium and Latvia, who'd just been, you know, come down from the A division and should have been in the A division. And it was like, whew, you know, like,
yeah, for sure,
you're smacked in the face, but you get better because of it. And you get better as a player. And I got better as a coach because of the experiences that I got at the B division level. And after doing it for a few years, I got offered a couple of positions over here, and I turned them down because I felt like I couldn't leave the players there. I had a group of players. I was like, I don't want to leave them. Like, I don't, you know, this is a huge commitment, as you know, coaching national teams. You're not getting paid for it, really. You're kind of doing it because you love the game and you love the program and trying to help the players. And I kind of just, I turned it down. And then I got to the stage with my last group that I was like, we're not going to go to the A division with any group, really, because we don't have the numbers of kids playing and the support to be able to do that. So what's my next step? You know, like, as a coach, I've turned down a couple of assistant positions already. If something else opens up, then I really need to think about it. And it was the right time in my life. And I remember getting the phone call, and I was sat in my flat with my friends. We were on a Saturday night drinking a bottle of wine, as you do. And, you know, I got the phone call from a coach that I had been connecting with on some of our national team players who'd been in the Ivy League. And she said, hey, I just got a head coach job in Houston. I know you've got connections there. I've told you I'd like you to come work with me when, you know, if I get a head coach job, what do you think? And I didn't even think twice, honestly. I did not know much about HBU. I really didn't. So I spent that night researching and asking questions and calling friends over here, and, you know, and it was like, it just felt right. It felt like this was the right move for me this time. And I'm still here 10 years later.
Yeah,
So
that's unbelievable. Just really quickly, so that would have been just the years leading up to this decision. Were you going to America in the summer to work camp, or to do any kind of, like, you know, catch up with coaches? What were you doing there?
So I was. So a former teammate of mine at Lamar, from Australia, she was coaching at TCU in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And introduced me to her associate head coach there. And he's kind of been a big influence since I moved here, more so. Like, the last 10 years, in fact, I talked to him last night. You know, he's been a great influence and support for me here. And I think everybody in Texas knows him. And he's one of these coaches that everybody knows here.
Sure.
But he was at TCU as associate head coach. And, you know, both of them said, look, if you want to come work camps and things, you know, you can bring kids over with you if you want, you know, and whatever. So I actually brought a couple of teams over, national teams, and we played in a U tournament here to get them exposure. And then I would work TCU camps, you know, several summers in a row. It was a great way for me to make connections with high school coaches here as well that were working the camp, and then also to develop that relationship with Coach Mitty and Coach Tidwell and his staff there. And then, it just kind of, like, I also was lucky that through Basketball Scotland, really, that I had an opportunity to connect with Skip Prosser at our camps. Sure. That we used to run, and he would come. Yeah. Again, like, just it seems crazy how things happen for me, but they do. But I was in the airport, in Shannon Airport of all places, in the duty free, just wasting time, and we'd come back from playing, I think it was the 4 countries in Ireland. And I hear someone say, "Coach, what are you doing in here?" And I turned around, and Skip and his wife had been playing golf and were waiting to fly back. And, he came up, and because we just finished a camp a few months before that. So he, had come over and talked. And then we just kind of stayed in touch. And he said to me, "Look, if you want, I can help you out by, getting in touch with the women's coaches." And he basically set up a kind of tour for me almost at Wake Forest, Duke, North Carolina. And I went and watched practices, and he set everything up for me. And so I was like, I'm doing this. And at that point I was like, I bought a ticket and I went over and I watched practices, and I connected with the then coach Mike Peterson at Wake about one of our post players on our team, and they started to recruit her. And it was really good for me, like really, really good. And I got to watch some of the men's practices too. And just making those connections, and that have helped me still,
Absolutely.
so just some really good people in my early years of coaching that have really helped me and given me opportunities.
So now you get on a plane, you go to Houston as an assistant coach. Are you at this time? Do you have like what's the early philosophy, points for you as a coach? Are you like really pinning yourself to some stuff like defense or conditioning? What were some of the main areas that you were like believing in, and then ultimately you start changing them along your way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely a big post player advocate. I was like the traditional kind of like back to the basket post stuff, like always looking to duck people in, using our post a ton. I liked playing with 2 posts, which now doesn't happen, but so that early on,
I don't know if there's any post there anymore.
right. So that was a big thing for me, and it had worked well with our national teams, so that was kind of a thing. I was like, oh yeah, like we got to have these post players. And that early on, that was definitely big for me because it had worked, and it was like I believed in it. But my philosophy is very different now. And a lot of that is because the game has changed a lot in the last 10 years, no doubt.
So let me just quickly ask, talking about your majoring in sports science, did that mean that, you were quite, focused on conditioning, how the athlete prepared, some of the early sports science stuff? I'm going to say early sports science, but even 10, 12 years ago, that was, although basketball, I feel, was always led in athletic development of any type of athletic performance, but at the same time, were you slightly ahead of the game in that respect, or how were you? Well,
it's funny because I did put a focus on conditioning, and I got a lot of pushback from the clubs. So when I had our national team sessions, I pushed our kids much harder than they'd ever been pushed, but it was based on sports science. It was like, this is what you need in order to be able to do this, this, and this. And I got a lot of pushback. And it was hard, because you want to have a good relationship with the club coaches. They're with their clubs way more than they're with us as national team coaches. But at the same time, if they're going to progress and they're going to improve as players, they have to be in shape to do some of the things you're asking them to do. And I was lucky because with Basketball Scotland, I was appointed as the 2012 coordinator. And this was in, I think, 2009. I started that, maybe late 2008, identifying, talented kids, boys and girls, that potentially had, we could get on the Olympic program with the Institute of Sport. And so I was also able to work with the Institute of Sport and work with athlete planning with them. And that was a holistic view. So, time management, nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. Psychology.
Everything. And so for the players on that program, they got all that support from the Institute. And for me, that was great because I was able to kind of tap into that for our national team as well. And having my background in sports science, it was something that I particularly was interested in and I was passionate about. but convincing people that have only done something one way
Yeah,
to
of
try
course.
something new is difficult, you know.
Yeah.
So it was challenging, but the girls bought into it, and I had multiple girls on that team come over here and play D1 and D2. You know, and that first group that we kind of went to Division B with, and they were in great shape. They were strong enough, you know. I mean, that was when we really tried to kind of push the weight room a bit more, which wasn't, you know,
Yeah,
it hasn't been a thing.
absolutely. I always actually, personally, actually thought, you know what, I could really, really be world class if I was in the women's game, you know, 10 or 15 years ago. I think now, I mean, I just go to the local health club and you can see what has changed. I'm seeing ladies in their mid 40s, you know, deadlifting, doing all kinds of CrossFit stuff, which is like you would never have seen that 10 years ago. So now I genuinely believe that the girls, even from a younger age, are, you know, in really good condition and stuff. But back then, I think that you could really have had some massive gains if you push that line.
I mean, I think about some of the players that I had at that time, that if they had had that support earlier, where they could have, you know, I mean, Mary Buchan was one that, you know, played in that first Euro B group with me that ended up at Old Dominion.
Wow.
And had she gotten that maybe 2 years before, I wonder where she could have been, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so, I mean, and that was great. When she signed there, they were a top 10 program nationally. But, you know, I mean, I do think that we had some good athletes. Becca Allison, who's my assistant coach here now, great athlete. But, you know, if she'd had that support earlier, she went to Old Dominion also, but where could she have gone? Because she's lightning quick and, you know, was able to do some things that no other kid I'd had over there could do. So, you know, yeah, I think had we pushed that a little earlier, we may have seen players going higher than they did.
Now, you get on a plane, you go to Houston, you're the assistant coach. Talk to me about how you are feeling going into that job, and more so as this, you know, young British Scottish coach, you know, who, you know, there's no history for any, you know, even in the men's game, there's almost no history for someone to be coaching at this level. Were you apprehensive, or because you've been through that process? I mean, what were you feeling at this time?
Um,
Or you just went for it?
yeah, I kind of did just go for it. Like, I wasn't nervous. The hardest thing was leaving my family and friends, you know, like that was definitely the hardest. And for the first few years, it was hard when I went home and I had to leave them again and then come back. That was really tough. But kind of now it's like, you know, I'm used to it. So this is home now. But I think when I got here and I realized that I was going to be allowed to recruit international players, like I was the recruiting coordinator at that point, and was given kind of like, she told me like, I need you to go and get players that are going to help us, and I don't care where they're from. So I was able to go and get, you know, I had an English kid, I had German kids, you know, we had kids from all over, and that was kind of because I've been in their shoes. It was nice because, you know, I understood them and I was able to get them in here. And, you know, I think that helped me. It helped me settle in a little bit as well.
Yeah. And what in these years as the assistant coach, what were you developing as a coach? Were you getting more reps on court, you know, in certain areas that you hadn't worked with before? What were you learning? What did you think you could, you know, do better? What were all these thoughts at this time?
I knew at that point I needed to be a better practice coach. You know, I thought, and I still think that, you know, I see a lot in games and I can make adjustments in games and I see, you know, that part of it. But I knew that, you know, I needed to get better in terms of planning practices and ensuring that I got that balance of, you know, player development and team. And I think that was really good for me those 3 years. You know, I think Mary, who was the coach here previous, she did a really good job of focusing on individual work. And, you know, we had very different philosophies. And that was honestly, I mean, and I bought into it because I saw it working. But at first, you know, I hadn't really run the system she was running. And so it was kind of like, why are we doing this? And, you know, I didn't really, because I hadn't done it before, I was kind of like, I didn't believe in it. But once I saw it being put into action on the floor, and I was like, okay, I can see why we're doing this now. And one thing that I remember from Dave years and years ago, I remember him even when I was 15, 16 years old, he would always tell me, like, if I say, well, why are we doing this? I'd always ask questions as a player, why are we doing this? And he said, well, offensively, I want to play to our strengths. And last year, we didn't have anyone that could duck in the post like that on the block and finish. We do now. So I want to make sure we've got something that we can put you and Jane in that position that you can duck in, and we're able to space the floor and get you the ball. And it's always stuck with me, like, play to your strengths, like your team's going to change every year. And at college, we get to choose who's on our team. But
interesting so that's starting to touch a little bit on your philosophy. So of course, as coaches, we can there are a number of ways we can go, but in my view, there are two main ways as a coach we can do exactly what you're talking about. We can fit philosophy to the strengths of the players, to changing year on year if you have player turnover, or you can be like a Jim Boeheim. We're going to play zone. It doesn't matter what players. Now, he has always had the luxury of recruiting players to that system, but still, when you go there, you're not playing man-to-man defense, and so exactly. So where were you at this moment? Were you that was in the back of your mind that I'm gonna change. I'm gonna be very flexible as a coach. Is that what you were thinking in the back of your mind?
Yeah, for sure. And then also because like the longer I was here, the more I realized the different levels within Division One. Because everybody just sees D1 and they think that well, you're playing D1, that's great, but there's so many different levels of Division One basketball.
Yeah.
And like realistically, I knew where we were at, and so while I would love to say we're going to go and get this style of player, that's not always going to happen at our level. If you're at UConn or Notre Dame, or you can go and you can hand pick those players. But we have to be flexible as coaches, and we have to understand that our recruiting is a little bit different, and we have to cast a wider net. And so we've got to be looking for like the overall fit, and then you have to think about the school that you're at as well. Because for me, I've been like this since day one. Like, I want our players to understand that I'll do anything for them. Like, I want them to trust me, and I want them to understand that I've got their back. And in the same respect, I want them to do that for me. So I want them to be here for 4 years.
Right, exactly.
The way that things are now, and I just had a conversation yesterday about this, but the way things are now in the NBA and with the transfer portal here, you're seeing so many people change teams consistently.
Wow. So, we could talk a little bit about that, but, I'm not involved with younger players now as much, but there's no doubt in my mind that they certainly have, they're less emotionally strong. They definitely, don't take criticism, like what we would call coaching. And then, when things don't go well for them in a program such as yours, they take the easy option. Instead of deciding over a summer that I'm going to really work and then I'm going to come back better, they just say, look, it's coach's fault, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to find a different program. And very disappointed in a lot of kids, especially the British kids who don't they aren't innately involved in basketball from America, so they should just be really deciding, hey, I've got here, I'm going to work and just play my role.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, Tony, is that some kids are getting really bad advice, whether it's because and not necessarily on purpose, but they're getting told that this school's better than this school because they play in their higher level as such. But maybe that particular player doesn't need to be going to that level because they're never going to hit the floor. Like it's tough now because a lot of people are recruiting international players for various reasons, and I think kids have to be smart and pick the place that one really wants them. Like, that's important. Like, do this club really want you and see you as a big part of their team down the line?
Sure.
And two, this is the part that I think gets missed out a ton, and is, am I going to fit socially on this campus and in this place? And we have 8 international players on our team this year, and part of the reason that our international kids like it here so much is because we only have about 4,000 students on campus, so it's not huge, but we're in this massive city that has every single thing you can imagine to do, and we're really close to the beach. And so they have everything. Like, socially, they have everything on their doorstep, and because we're a little bit smaller, they can get to know people quickly on campus and develop relationships quicker. And I think that a lot of kids overlook that part of it when they're making the decision. Yes, it should be about basketball. That's why you're coming over here, but you have to be happy in every way and understand this is going to be your life for 4 years. And if you're bored because there's nothing to do where you are, or, a lot of kids, I mean, I've talked to a couple of kids from the UK that have picked schools in the north, and then, that I had recruited previously, and then they've got in touch with me a year later and said, like, oh God, it's so cold up here, I hate it. Well, I mean, stuff like that they don't think about. And I think that's really, really important in the process. Like, it's not just about who has the biggest gym, who's sponsored by Nike or Under Armour, like, all that stuff. Like, that doesn't matter.
No.
And they have to think about what their goals are individually too. Like, if they want to play for the national team, is that program going to support you in coming back and play in the European Championships?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That kind of thing, and that gets lost a lot.
I mean, long term, I mean, I've been a big advocate with younger players that they need to think about some of those things, like does the program have a history of developing players and right. getting them to the next level? If that's your goal, to be a professional basketball player, versus, I had a player called Eugene Barr. He actually wasn't my own junior player, but he was from Brixton. And Eugene went to Princeton, and he went to Princeton because, he wanted to have a 4-year degree from Princeton. And now he works in finance in New York City after he played for me for 1 year at Birmingham professionally and in Europe. And he played some other places as well. But ultimately, a 4-year degree from Princeton is going to get you a high level job somewhere in America if that was your goal. So these are, like you said, and the correct advice needs to be given.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's different for every person. I think that's what gets lost too. Like, there's no generic advice here. It's like, it's going to be different for every player, because like Eugene, he wanted to work in the States and knew that, a degree from Princeton would help. Some others don't. Like, we've got girls that, know that they want to go back to Germany or Luxembourg or wherever they're from and work. And so we work with them. Okay, what do you need academically then? Like, what, when you leave here, what do you need to get into your grad school there, so that they've got that in place? And I think there's so many aspects to this. And I think a lot of it is just people don't know.
Yeah.
And it's sad. Like I say, some people are getting bad advice, and I don't always think it's because people mean it. It's just they don't understand the system.
Okay, so you're assistant for 3 years, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you get offered. How explain the process of how you were offered the head coach's position, and did you feel at that time you were ready to be a head coach, or it was something that was given as just an opportunity and you just had to take it?
So I actually had already started looking at other positions. There was a head coach position at a D2 school that had come open, and the AD there had called me and had a conversation with me. And I kind of said, this was like close to the end of the season, and I thought, okay, I don't want to do anything right now, because I wanted to wait and talk to our head coach at the end of the season and tell her that, I may interview for this position. And then it was I think it was like April that the AD, came and talked to me and said, listen, the position is open and we want to offer it to you before we do anything else. So what do you think? And I was like, honestly shocked. Like, because in my mind, I felt like I was ready to move on to a head coaching position, maybe at a lower level, but like, I just felt like that was my next move. And I had no clue that this was going to happen. And so it was like, oh, I remember sitting there like, do you need an answer right now? Because I can't give you an answer right now, you know? And leaving that meeting with him thinking, did that just happen? Like, you know, how does that happen? And he had said to me, like, you know, you've got great relationships with everyone on campus. The players really want you to stay. And that's important for us that we retain the players that because basically I had recruited all of those players, you know. And he said, like, because I remember him saying to me probably about a year in that, you know, he said it would have been interesting if you'd applied for the job in the first place because you had a lot of head coach experience. And I think I really truly do. And it frustrates me when I talk to national team coaches from overseas that haven't had the chances that I've had. But I really, really value what I went through with Basketball Scotland. Every aspect of, you know, the national team program, the basketball development stuff, like that has helped me in so many ways as a head coach. In managing people, in managing a budget, in planning and periodization, just, you know, working with a strength coach, you know, obviously here we have way more resources than I had back home, but, you know, it definitely helped me. I mean, I remember saying to the ED when I accepted the job, I was like, but this is different. I was kind of like freaking out, you know, and he was like, wait, you already do all this stuff. You've done all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right. You know, like it was just a kind of, is this happening moment? You know, like, is this really happening? So, and I went out recruiting, I think it was like late April. And it was like, wow, I actually now I have to make a final decision on everything, you know? So, but I was really grateful for the 3 years I had, and you know, I learned a lot in those 3 years, and I love this school. I love the people here. It's you know, sometimes it can be frustrating because, you know, again, I talk about the levels of D1. Like maybe we don't have as much as some other D1 schools have, but the support here at the school and the people are just fantastic. And I love living in Houston, so this is a great situation for me.
So you turn, you know, you really have great success at the start, and you're building now. What lessons are you learning at this, you know, early on, and you start, you know, realizing that you've made some mistakes, and philosophically, are you changing, you know, now? What's this 7 years been, this journey, that part of the journey?
I think definitely changed in my recruiting philosophy. I think that's changed a lot. I made some mistakes. I remember two things I think I made mistakes in. One was early on, I wanted to give my assistants a voice. Like I had a great staff and I wanted to give them a voice. And I remember one player that they loved, and I just wasn't feeling it. You know, and I watched her all summer and I was like, there was just something that, you know, but she played pretty well in the summer, and I could see where she could fit in. And so they felt so passionate about her that I was like, okay, you know, like we need that position. You guys, you know, I'm outnumbered here, but I should have trusted my gut. Let's just say I should have trusted my gut on that one. It didn't work out. And I think that's something I learned. Like I do have to trust my gut because I have been pretty good with that stuff, and like my intuition, I need to listen to it more. And then I think just like recognizing parental involvement, that's been something that has changed a lot over the years, you know, like paying more attention during the recruiting process to that, because, you know, we have had some issues. I think everybody deals with that now at the collegiate level. And, you know, in my mind, it's kind of like, I can't really wrap my head around that coming from the UK where you have to pay to play basketball. Here, you're getting a scholarship given to you, and, you know, everything's getting taken care of. And I can't understand how parents are as involved, you know, as they are. But that's part of the game here now.
Yeah.
So, you know, just learning to kind of pay more attention to that stuff during the recruiting process has helped. Because again, there was a couple of things I overlooked early on that were red flags that I kind of thought, it'll be okay, but it wasn't. So, you know, just that kind of thing from a recruiting perspective. And then from a coaching perspective, kind of moving away from that old style 2-post offense. And I mean, I'm big on pushing the ball. Like, we love running the floor. And it's funny because, we're running a lot more ball screen offense than I've ever run, because we have the personnel now that, it works for. But we've really, really struggled the last 3 years. And I've found it really hard as a coach because we've had, and this is not, I don't want this to sound like an excuse, because it's not. But, on average, we've had about seven or eight max players available for practice the last 3 years because of injuries.
Wow.
And it's been so challenging as a coach, because I really genuinely thought we had all the pieces. It's like, like you think you've got all the pieces to do well, and you can't get them all on the floor at the same time. Last year was probably the most frustrating,
And do you, as a coach, do you constantly review with your staff and think about why those players are getting injured? What are the processes? Can you change some processes? What especially given the fact that you've got such a good basketball situation there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I'm a big advocate. Like, we don't practice any longer than 2 hours. That's our maximum practice time. I just, that's something I've always kind of, and again, that changed because when I was younger, I was like, we'll be in the gym as long as we need to be in the gym, but now 2 hours is our max practice time. And we're very conscious about planning our sessions and periodization, I think more so than ever. But we've had a big turnover in the weight room, and
Right.
I think that is something that we've kind of looked at. And actually, we were supposed to bring in a company this year who were going to really overhaul everything that we did and look at the reasons why we had these injuries, and individualized programs a little bit more. And that hasn't happened because of COVID, unfortunately, because we can't do the in-person stuff that we were going to do. But that's something that we have been looking at. And
are you using any kind of load management kind of software or integrated with strength and conditioning, sports science?
Yeah, we were last year, and we're actually looking at changing our supplier at the moment, because the problem we've got right now, and I'm sure this is the case with a lot of programs, is that every day our players are having to fill out questionnaires on COVID. Like, they get the email every morning. So before they even come into the gym, they have to fill out this full, questionnaire, etc. Then they have to get their temperature check done and all this other stuff before they walk through the door. And then the app that we were using was basically a lot of the same things, like this, how do you feel here, And I thought that was great. Like, I think from a load management perspective, it was great because it was indicating to us when players may need more rest. I think that was the biggest thing. And as a coach, I've definitely changed in that respect, like listening to the players more about their bodies and using that load management app to check that. But now you add COVID into the mix, and there's this other level of issues that can crop up that we have to deal with too. And so it's been very difficult from a conditioning standpoint. So far, we've actually only been working out for 3 weeks, but we haven't been able to do what traditionally we could do because they had this massive gap where we were not watching them. So our strength coach gave them a home program to do, but some didn't have access to a weight room. So we're kind of all these different levels now with the players in terms of their conditioning and their strength, and kind of trying to get them back in sync again. It's been really hard because it's a different challenge that we've never had to face in that respect. So, yeah.
Just if we didn't have COVID and this was a regular basketball season, talk to me about what a typical week looks like. What's your normal game days like? I'm assuming Friday, Saturday?
So in conference, it's Wednesday and Saturday.
Wednesday, Saturday. Okay. So what would be a typical practice week? That's a really hard split. Wednesday, Saturday. What are you doing in season? Sunday is a day off, or just a recovery day? What are you actually doing anything on that day, or is it completely a day off?
Usually a day off. We have which I'm sure a lot of teams use, like Fast Scout app and Fast Draw app, and the players get the next scout that they can read over, so that they do that on their own time on a Sunday. But we usually give them that day off. Roll, stretch, etc., but they don't do any activity on that Sunday. We try and have a complete day off where we can with that. But yeah, we practice on a Monday and a Tuesday before the game, on the Wednesday.
So Monday, I'm assuming full contact, like pretty high intensity, and then tapering it on Tuesday pretty quickly.
Yeah, Tuesday's more of like a review of the scout, and then we'll probably do a lot more on the Tuesday of game shots that we're going to get in that game. Like if it's a zone team, we'll work on whatever we're doing there, and a much shorter practice basically to prep them.
Can you develop scout teams with this Wednesday, Saturday? Can you, or is it pretty hard?
It's hard.
Yeah.
We had this year, we're not allowed to with COVID, but last year and the year before we had guys that would come in as our scout or their scout team.
Awesome.
But trying to get guys that are not full-time basketball players to run. It's hard. We have one guy who thought he was Steph Curry, and every time he caught the ball, he would shoot it. And actually, he was a pretty good shooter, but like getting him to run anything was just never going to happen. So,
crazy.
But I mean, it's kind of good it was good having them, because we had a couple of good athletes in there that the girls really had to get on the glass, and that was good. But it's hard, the quick turnaround and kind of so. Sometimes, not all the time, but I'll use our staff sometimes. If they're, if someone's running a complicated offense, we'll have our staff jump in and run it in the half court to talk about our coverages and things, but I mean, really, we've kind of switched our focus on scouts to ourselves, and, ball screen coverage, we're trying to kind of standardize how we do things so that we,
absolutely,
and focus on us. And that way there's less worrying about what the other team do and more on what we do. And I think that's something that, we've kind of changed. Again, I've changed that a lot, because I used to be
I certainly last year, when I was coaching 60 games, in a season there's no question that you have to have base defense for, single side, whatever action step ups, whatever you're going to see. I tried to develop base defense, and then if there was a really good player or good couple of players, then we would have an individual scout for certain things that would happen. So I think that that's really important. So on a Wednesday you play, let's just take this for an example. You play on a Wednesday. What are you doing pre-game in the meeting? Are you heavy with video, or just going over main game points, rah, and then out? Or what's your process?
So we usually have a shoot around that morning if we play on a Wednesday night. And again, that's kind of shifted. It used to be about, let's go over covering their offense, blah, blah, blah. And it's more so, what are we going to do? Like if we're running, our horns action, where we're running our flare action off of that, like what are we really having to focus on? We know they're going to go under, so maybe our point guard needs to work on getting that shot up a little bit quicker, whatever it is. And we kind of focus on that a little bit more. And then we'll watch the scout again. So, I mean, they've got it. They can watch it 100 times if they want on their app, but we usually like watch that and then have our pregame meal, and then we're into kind of, they usually go back, and some of them take a nap, some go and get shots up, and then they come back out for, warm-ups later on. So.
And then pre-game in the locker room, you yourself, what are you stressing there? Just game, keys to the game, key matchups?
So it's really interesting that you bring that up, because when I first got here, I was absolutely shocked at the pregame rituals in college basketball for coaches. And I used, as an assistant, I was always like, what are they doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense at all from a sports science perspective. So the teams would come out, they'd be on the floor, an hour and a half before, and which I immediately was like, nope, okay, for this age level and things, that shouldn't happen. But anyway, so they'd come out and then they'd go in the locker room with like an hour to go. They'd come back out. Some teams would go in again for like 15 minutes after they'd warmed up and stretched. And they're sitting in that locker room for 15 minutes getting cold again. So muscle fibers are just slowing down and, and I was thinking like, what is going on? And then I would never, ever see head coaches at all in the warm-ups. They would come out 1 minute, 2 minutes before the game starts. And I always used to think like, what are they doing? Like, what, I couldn't understand that, because coming from overseas, you're on the floor most of the time and you're talking to your players, you're, talking, I like to see who the other team have out there warming up and, all that stuff. So for my first game, as a head coach, I remember I was out on the floor and we don't go out, we don't start our official game warm up. The players can get shots up and things, and get loose. But the way we do it is we have our game chat, I guess you can call it, at like 55 minutes. We're in there for about 8 to 10 minutes. They're back on the floor, and they're out there for 45 to 50 minutes total. But that they'll do their stretch, which takes about 12 minutes with our trainer, and she stretches them fully after they're warm. So we don't go back in the locker room after that.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So, really good.
Now I'm in the locker room. I stay in the locker room after they come out, and usually I'll do radio for our radio station. And then I usually try and come on the floor with about sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes to go. Because I like to have those conversations with our players, like, if our point guards, if I'm just want to reiterate things with them. But we don't go back in as a full team. And then, we have at 3 minutes, we come in and we have our starters sit down and all right, this is what we're doing first play, remember, blah, blah, blah. And then that's it. And I guess that I've changed with that as well, because before I would have had a lot more content and a lot more of those conversations. And I've learned that it goes in one ear and out the other a lot of the time. So the less you say sometimes, the better. So
halftime talk.
Yeah. So normally the players go in, and I like to have the players have a conversation. And so on the whiteboard, there's 2 sections for them. Positives and things they have to do better. And so as a staff, we'll meet, we look at our stat sheets, etc. We have a conversation, and then usually I have 3 things in terms of adjustments. I try not to go over 3.
Good stuff.
And so then I'll go back in and the first thing I do is look at what the players have written on the board and ask them, why did you write this?
Coach, where did you learn that?
I don't think I did. I think it's just something we came up. I really think it was just that, talking to the players. And
I've heard of it. I've never seen it. I've never seen it in men's professional basketball. I'm not sure I would ever do it, but that's a great. I love it. I really want to make that a big point today, because that's a great teaching point. A lot of coaches, like Coach Alan Keene's been doing a lot of that type of stuff, empowering the athlete. I'm not fully against the process and the principles. I'm against some of that at pro level, because I believe that at pro level, when you start getting players each believing they've got the right answer, you can really get indecisiveness, out there on the floor. And I believe that, you can deal with that in a different way at a different time. But I love what you're doing there. That's really, really good. Really, really good.
I think as a player, I wish I'd had the opportunity a little bit more because it's different when you're on the floor, right? Like I might think that the ball screen coverage we're having a problem with, and a player may say, well, coach, we talk to our guards all the time about flattening up the lane lines. Like if we're going under ball screens in the middle of the floor, we got to flatten up better because we open our hips too much. And sometimes the players will say, well, coach, like watch that screen, like she's moving. And as a coach, you're like, oh, that's your excuse, but then the first possession you watch and the post player is kind of moving into, and that's why she's getting hit on the screen. And so I do want to listen to them as much as I can. And I think when you recruit the type of player that you can trust, that they're going to have that opinion. And I think it's worked because it gives the group the opportunity to say something. And then we ask them that before we go into our three things. And a lot of the time, the three things that we've, I'll talk about, we've got to focus on, or we've got to adjust or whatever, are covered in their notes anyway, in some way, maybe not as much detail. Sometimes they miss out the detail, but, they kind of get it. And I think it's like, okay, yeah, that has to be our focus in the second half. And I, I've liked it. We've only done it for about 3 years, but I think it's been really good for them. It makes them feel like we're listening to them,
And then post game, short post game, or how's what's the process there?
I don't go in the locker room after a game.
Wow. Right.
Again, that's something I've changed. I think I did a really bad job my first year of being a head coach here, of letting my emotions get to me. And we had a pretty good year that first year, but I think that on the games that we didn't play well, and I said some things I shouldn't have said. I was very negative. And on reflection, I knew that I couldn't keep doing that, because I knew that, and again, that was a couple of players who were telling me that that's how they felt. And not from coach is yelling at me or coach is mad at me. Just like, look, we understand you feel like that, but maybe, it's not the right time. And after kind of talking to, and those were senior players that, I just thought, they're right. Like, I shouldn't be letting my emotions get the better of me after games. And so what I usually do at home games anyway is they go and they stretch in the back gym and with our trainer, and then they go in the locker room and change and things. And then we always eat post-game meal together now.
Right.
And so I'll wait until we get into post-game meal, because that gives me time to calm down and, do radio and stuff and kind of get my thoughts together, talk to our staff a little bit, and then go into post-game meal. And sometimes I'll say things then.
When are you like debriefing the game? Do you do that because your turnaround is so quick? So let's say we've had a Wednesday night game. On the Thursday, had the staff clipped, and are you debriefing and looking at positive, negatives, or something that you've done well, something you haven't done well, and then straight back into the practice process? How do you do that?
Yeah, usually it's clipped, and then for specific things on players, like we have an app called Teamworks that we use, that we post on Teamworks, that they can pick up their film. And so typically what will happen is the point guards will go and meet with Amber that Thursday if there's something specific that she wants to show them, that we've talked about. Sometimes I'll say, hey, like they've got to back up quicker on that high ball screen. They're getting too hipped up or whatever. And so she'll show them the clips and go over it with them and explain it. So it's a lot more individual feedback on a Thursday after a Wednesday night game than it is, to them anyway, than it is team wise. And we make the adjustments with the staff, team adjustments. But the individual feedback will come from the coaches directly to the players on the Thursday about things that they need to focus on individually.
So Thursdays are what, active recovery with some shooting, stretching?
So typically, what we'll do on a Thursday is we'll kind of cover the scout, but like half court, like slowly, how, if again, like if it's something specific they're running, we'll go through it and, this is how we should be, jump into the ball a little bit more because of the way they're setting the screen or whatever. So it's not a ton of stuff. And then, so we kind of cover that, and then we'll talk about what are we running against their defense. So, and we don't, at that point, you don't need to go through your own offense a ton of times, but there could be tweaks. So a couple of teams in our league play zone, and, they're very different in how they play their zone. So, we'll talk about, okay, instead of our back screen happening here, I want it to be a little bit lower, and this is what we should be looking at. So just little tweaks, more so on a Thursday. And then Friday, we get up and down a little bit, not too much in stuff. And then we play on a Saturday again.
That's amazing. So really and truthfully, it's really hard to develop the individual athlete, and even from a team perspective. So like you're saying, if you can't even get, a lot of bodies onto the floor, I mean, most of your real work has to be done in the summer and the preseason. I'm assuming that's what's got to happen.
Yeah, and we talked off before we started this. Like I'm a huge advocate for changing the whole calendar from the NCAA because, to me it's the wrong way around. Like the way it works right now, we're in 8 hours a week, 4 of which is on the court and 4 is in the weight room. To me, we should have more time now to do individuals with these kids, because typically, normally we jump from 8 hours to 20 hours a week once we start full practice. But that makes no sense to me because we need all the individual work now and in the summer, and we don't get it. It's flip-flopped the wrong way. We actually should be tapering down when it comes to season. Well, that is it. It's crazy. I think it's one of those things that hasn't been changed and addressed, but I think COVID has kind of given us the opportunity to do that. And through the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, they've actually recommended that the student athletes have recommended that we go from 8 to 12 to 20. So we have that bridging time in there. We increased a little bit to 12, and I like that idea. So we should find out tomorrow if that's been approved, and I would like that if that does get approved.
Okay. Taking a bit of a tangent here, what are your thoughts as really one of the highest level coaches in our game at this moment? I mean, what's your thoughts on the British, British coaching, on the coaching fraternity, also your own experiences? Because you were a national team coach, I'm assuming that you have had some kind of involvement with British basketball, and there was some, kind of correspondence with you to try to bring you within the programs. I mean, are you actively, involved, Basketball Scotland? I mean, that's a massive question, just give me your thoughts on that.
Yes, to a lot of those things, yes. I think early on, like, I want to say it was like my first or second year, when I was a head coach, I was approached to kind of get involved with GB programs in the summer. And I just didn't feel at that time that it was appropriate for me to be leaving for that length of time during the summer when I was trying to build this program. And as a head coach, I needed to be here, and I needed to be recruiting in the States, in Texas particularly, and missing that whole AAU summer. I just didn't think it was right for me. I wanted to do it, but I couldn't, and I had to put my full-time job first. It's definitely something I would love to do, if it worked out where it wasn't going to affect this program, but I have to obviously put this first and foremost every time. And I just didn't think that as a head coach, it's something. Now, if my assistant coaches were given the opportunity to do it, I would completely encourage them to do it. And I think, and this is something I've said, I think that the British basketball model does a better job of preparing people to be head coaches than a lot of people give it credit for. Because, it's a very different seat to sit in 12 inches to my right as an assistant than it is to make that call 12 inches to your left, and as college assistant coaches, a lot of them have never, ever called a game. They've never had to make decisions. A lot of them have come from being players straight out of college. They've never had any formal type of coach education over here. And I think the coach education process in the UK with UKCC, a lot of people kind of say, well, it's not realistic enough, but it's something, right? It's something that's preparing you and trying to develop you as a coach and not throwing you in without any kind of formal training. And I was lucky. I obviously got to do all of that and tutored and, was involved in that side of things. And I think that really helped me as a head coach over here. But I like that process. And I was really pleased to see the other day that Basketball England have got a new female coaches group, where they're putting an emphasis on the female coaches and trying to get elite female coaches together to develop them. And I think that's really huge, because when I was doing national teams, I got involved in the national teams because there were no females to coach the women's team. I mean, that's sad, that the only reason I was asked was because they needed a female on staff. And, I think sadly that's still the case with a lot of our national programs. And I was delighted to see that Joe Leadham and Jen Leadham are going to be involved you know, with the GB programs, and you know, they've had other females coaching the teams, Karen Burton, etc. Like, I think it's great that, you know, they've managed to do that, but I wish that
this week, obviously, the news was that, you know, Vanessa Ellis has taken a job in Austria, which
yeah,
is tremendous. You know, great that, you know, that she'll be the first. I believe she'll be the first female to coach professionally in Europe, which is a big
yeah,
step forward, and, you know, shows
yeah.
real intent there as well. So, yeah, that's great.
And
Do you see yourself, you know, in the future coming back to the UK? You know, some clinic type stuff. Have you been asked? You know, any thoughts on that? It's not easy. You know, you have such you know, an incredible. It's not just, you know, coaching one season. You know, you got a whole kind of, you know, university that you represent. It's a full-time job. But can you see yourself coming back? You know, what's
I've been asked a few times to do clinics, and unfortunately, it's really hard for us with all the NCAA restrictions on doing clinics. That's the hardest part of it, honestly. The rules on being able to speak at other people's clinics are because of recruiting, effectively. Because, you know, previously what happened was people would ask people to come do clinics and use it as a recruiting tool, and, you know, so it is hard for us to do that. I would be very open to it. If it was done within the rules. Obviously now, with, you know, Zoom being much more prevalent in our society, it makes things a lot easier to have conversations. I mean, you know, I think it's been hard because I know Basketball Scotland has had its challenges just in changes in staffing, etc. And, you know, I do keep in touch with Bart Singers, who's with the Caledonia Pride. I
Bart's
think
one of my guys.
yeah,
Shout
he's
out to Bart. You know, he's my guy. I
yeah,
believe in him 1,000%. Used to
yeah,
go to watch his practices. You know, have coffee with him. He's one of the most interesting coaches that I know. Fantastic guy. He'll be a guest pretty soon as well.
okay. Well, so I like to stay in touch with him because he does it. I think he's very realistic in, you know, his thoughts on where we're at as well with the talent coming through. Um, and, you know, I think it's been hard. Like, I mean, I can say this, and this is not in any way negative, but, you know, we did get asked, and I have, you know, myself and Becca, and then I have another coaching colleague, Neil Harrow, who's at Troy as an assistant coach. And, you know, we were approached, I think it was like last September or something, to kind of get involved with some elite pathway programming. And it's literally at the stage where once we're in season, we can't do anything else. Like, we are just full on. And I felt bad saying I can't. Like, I mean, if you'd asked me 3 months ago or the end of our season, I might have had more time, but now it's like there's no way.
Yeah.
And I think people don't really understand till you're in it how time consuming recruiting is here. It's nonstop. It's 24/7. I mean, last night my phone was dinging at like 10:30. We're watching the game, you know, and you know, I'm getting the look like, why is your phone going off during the game? But I mean, it's constant, you know, it's like,
I mean,
and that's how it is.
that's the one difference between, you know, pro coaching and college coaching. You know, you have to put the massive emphasis on recruiting. You know, it's I mean, what would you give that as a split? Almost 70-30, 60-40?
Well, it's funny. Someone asked me the other day, like, they said, like, you don't spend as much time on X's and O's and on the floor as I would have thought. And I said, honestly, I think that we probably only spend about 20% of our time on the floor
Unbelievable.
doing stuff. And, you know, we're kind of higher academic school, so staying on top of academics for us is important, even as basketball coaches. And a lot of people, that gets lost with a lot of people. Like, why are you worried about that as a basketball coach? And because we have to be, and we want to make sure that our players are exceeding in the classroom as well as on the floor. And you know, so we have academic teams within our staff as well. And so there's a lot that goes into this that doesn't happen at the pro level, you know, and it's very different dealing with collegiate age female athletes.
Sure.
I'm very lucky. Like I say, we've got 8 internationals, and I'll tell you that my international players are so low maintenance. It's fantastic. And Yeah, I'll add some more if I can, but,
Right.
but yeah.
Right.
So
3 end of game questions. I'm going to take
yeah.
away the fourth, but 3 favorite player that you've coached.
Uh,
Always put everyone on the spot.
yeah, it's tough, right? Because for different reasons, I think I had favorites in different ways. But I think overall, the GB team in 2012, Rose played for me. She played at club at City of Edinburgh for me. She played with the national team under 16 and under 18 with me. She scored the winning basket at the Europeans when we won our first Europeans. She made a layup on the buzzer to win that for us. She I'm so proud of her for what she's overcome in her life, and like basketball basically gave her, an opportunity, and she took it. And she's living in Oklahoma now. When we played at Oklahoma State last year, she brought her little boy and sat behind the bench, and we played at ORU as well, and she brought him, and they were sat cheering for us behind the bench. And
Right.
I'm so proud of her, and I loved her competitive drive. Like, she was a pain in my butt, and she knows that. And she was definitely challenging, and she challenged me as a coach because she was very feisty. But in terms of a competitor and someone that just went hard all the time, and she was, yeah, I mean, if I had to pick a favorite, it would be Rose.
Okay. Favorite all-time basketball coach.
That one's pretty easy for me. I've got a very soft spot for Pops. I just love, the relationship part of coaching for me is so important. And I respect the way that he deals with his players so much. I've been lucky that, I've been able to kind of interact with several of them and talk about, their relationship with him. And I think it's, I just think the respect that he has, not just from players that he's coached, but from other players, says so much about him.
Yeah.
And I love how he develops coaches. You look at his coaching tree, and he just puts them into just the positions to succeed. And I'm a big fan of him.
Awesome. Go to saying or statement on a daily basis, weekly basis.
Don't know if I can say that on here
Oh.
without getting in trouble. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, actually. That's a tough one.
Yeah,
if you ask my players back home,
yeah.
they would have been able to answer that. They would say, "Get to the baseline." That would be they would tell you that was my all-time used one.
Yeah.
But now, I think, honestly, if I was answering that for right now, it would be read the defense. Like, I say that more than I say anything else.
Okay, awesome. Read the defense.
Yeah.
I like it. I just want a quick little story. I could bet, of all the players that Nick Nurse has coached, throughout his professional career in the UK and in some of those other stops before he got to the NBA, he was always toes to the line. He used to have them on that baseline, and that's what a lot of those players will remember. So it's not as crazy as it sounds. So
no, but I know my Scottish players that was what they would say, get on the baseline. That'd be the thing. Yeah. So.
I doubt he's doing that in Toronto at this moment, but you never know. I'll find that out sometime.
Yeah.
Coach, Liza, we could go forever, talking, about in so many different directions. But, firstly, I want to say thank you for your time, because you're extremely busy coaching at the highest level. And secondly, I'm pretty certain I'm going to have you on again, because, you've got such a huge, journey to continue in your career. But I really appreciate this time for you to come on the Pick and Pop podcast.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it as well. And I just want to finish by saying that, I really, really feel so lucky to be in the position that I am. And I know there's a lot of great coaches in the UK that I wish had the same opportunities that I did. And if there's anything that, I can ever do to try and help those people, they can reach out to me at any point, because I've been lucky to have these opportunities. So I'm always happy to try and give advice or help to people if they need it.
Coach, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Tony.